If you're new to bikes, if you never put gas on a motorcycle before, you know that it's not like in a car. There's actually an art to this. So you can see I gotta kind of look in there to check the gas levels, because this will stop a lot before it's actually filled up. So you gotta press on this and then kind of just gauge it yourself. So it's a little bit of an art. It's something that I didn't know when I got a motorcycle. I was very confused every time I kept putting in some gas and it was never full, until I started doing this. And then you just gotta kind of gauge it. As you can see, it's starting to get a little full, but it still has a lot to go. So let's see. Okay, we're getting pretty much up there. Almost. Alright, I think that should be about right. And there you go. $5. That's about as good as it gets over here in California. There we go. Gas is full. There we go. 211 miles for a full tank. Now we're good to go. So that's a little bit of a tip for those of you that don't know how it's like to put some gas on your bike, but that's actually not what we're going to be talking about today. So even though it's kind of involved, it's kind of related. What I want to talk to you guys about today is some of the things that I wish I knew before buying a bike. And this is going to be kind of like a multi-part series that I'm going to be doing, but today specifically I wanted to talk about the expenses of having a bike, because I literally had no idea how insanely expensive it was going to be to own a motorcycle. You know, I was one of those guys that I was very naive. I've never bought a vehicle from a dealership before or anything like that, so I was really in for, you know, an entire world that I knew nothing about. So first of all, I went ahead and I bought this bike, and it was listed about $6,000. So let me give you guys a little bit of a idea of how things go. You go ahead and you buy the bike at the listing price, right? Which, by the way, is very much negotiable. This is something that I also did not know. I didn't know that you could go into a dealership and actually negotiate the price and actually walk away from there with a much better price than it's listed for. So that's tip number one that I was completely unaware about. But even further than that, I would say that the DMV fees is something that I vastly underestimated, because I ended up paying quite a bit of fees, and things start adding up very, very quickly. So not only the price of the bike, the DMV fees, the taxes, but then other things that I hadn't even thought about, like your gear. Like, you can't skip out on your gear. I thought I was just gonna buy my bike and then, you know, I'd be good to go, but it's actually definitely not that way. And if you want to go ahead and do this the best that you can, and you want to have a long riding career, you want to make sure that you're as safe as possible, which means spending a pretty penny on really good gear, especially a helmet. You know, helmet is probably going to be the number one thing that's going to prevent you from dying if you actually get into a very serious accident, or just any accident at all. If you hit your head or anything, you don't want to be cheap with your helmets. But then everything else, like your jacket, your pants, your gloves, your boots, everything, that costs quite a bit of money. And then additionally to that, insurance. Insurance is going to be insanely expensive, and especially if you're young, you're a new rider, it's your first time with a bike. The higher the CC bike you have, the more expensive it's going to be. Mine is, you know, not that expensive because it's only a 390, but if it's a high CC bike, it's going to be a lot more expensive. But I've been quoted as much as $7,000 on insurance by very big insurance companies out there, which, by the way, is a lot more than the actual cost than the bike itself, which is absolutely wild to think about. But think about it like this, guys. Let's start doing a little bit of math. Bike, let's say, got a cheap bike, let's say $6,000. let's say after DMV fees, taxes, and you know, the dealer extra fees and stuff like that, it's gonna run you about another extra $2,000. So at the moment, you're about $8,000 deep. A jacket that's pretty good is gonna cost you anywhere from $200 to $300. Some quality armor pants is gonna cost you anywhere from about the same, $200 to $300. Some quality boots are gonna cost you about $150 to, let's say, $300. Some gloves are gonna cost you about $65 to $150. And if you go ahead and get like some gauntlet style gloves that you could use for racing and stuff, that can run to you upwards of $300. And let's see, a good helmet, which you definitely don't want to be cheap on, that's going to cost you anywhere from $500 to $800. So let's say that at bare minimum, once we add all of that up, it's going to be at least $1,500 on the low side. On the lowest side, if you get really lucky with prices and all that, another $1,500. So right now we're what? $9,500 deep. Another thing that you got to pay for is going to be the course for the motorcycle safety course, which I do highly recommend that you do, because if you're a new rider, you definitely want to go ahead and start off on the right note by actually taking the course. It also lowers your insurance, and it waives the DMV riding test in some places. Here in California, it definitely is worth taking the beginner riding course. So that's going to be about another $500. Now we're at what? We're 10,000 deep. And we had started with the initial investment of just, you know, just about $6K. So we're already 10,000 deep. After that, you got to get insurance if you're going to do this right. In case you get into an accident, in case somebody hits you or whatever, you definitely want to go ahead and have insurance. Riding around without insurance, that's the last thing that you want to do, especially if you get into an accident. So on average, on the lowest side, if you're going with like major insurance companies, it's going to run you about another $2,000. So where are we right now? We're about 12K deep. So we're already at double the investment that you originally were thinking of. You know, it's not about, hey, you know, you go to a dealership, you put $6,000 on this new bike, and that's it. It's a done deal. You gotta invest on your gear. You gotta invest in your motorcycle safety course. You gotta invest in really good insurance, preferably full coverage insurance. You gotta, you know, spend all these extra fees, and that's without even counting the first initial maintenance. So when you get a bike, it's obviously going to be an ongoing investment to maintain the bike. So this one specifically, you get the first maintenance after 600 miles. That's going to cost, that for this specific bike, which is a KTM, it cost me $350 to do the first maintenance. And I'm not going to do any type of maintenance by myself, because obviously I'm new to this, so I'm not going to fuck up the bike or anything like that. But first maintenance, $350. If you go ahead and you get something else, like a BMW, a Ducati, or whatever it may be, a more, you know, a fancier brand, that's going to cost you a lot more. You know, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. It could be upwards of $500 in terms of like the actual cost. And that's something that you got to do, you know, quite a bit of times. You do it the first time at the 500, 600 miles, and then after that, what do you got to do? You know, after like 3,000 miles, you got to do it again. After a couple other 1,000 miles, you got to replace the tires. And it's always going to be a constant investment to maintain your bike so that it's up to, you know, safety riding standards. And that's just the deal with having a vehicle. If you have a vehicle, whether it be a bike or whether it be a car, you know that it's never going to be in always a perfect condition. You know, there's always something that's going to go wrong with it sooner or later, because it's just a matter of time. So with bikes, this is no exception. This is going to happen. So you're going to have to drop a pretty penny on that as well. So moral of the story, having a bike is super expensive, like really, really expensive. A lot more expensive than I thought it was going to be. But especially on things that I really had no idea we're gonna be so expensive, like the gear. And yes, you could be that guy that's saying, oh well, you know, you only really have to have the helmet. That's really what the law is looking for, so I can ride around with, you know, no jacket, no armored pants, no motorcycle riding boots and stuff like that. But that's a bad decision, to be honest. That's a bad decision. If you want to be responsible and you want to reduce your chances of a catastrophic injury, you want to go ahead and drop a pretty penny on your safety. You don't want to go cheap. You don't just want to be like, okay, I'm going to find the cheapest thing that I can find and that's it. You know, you got to remember that if you actually do get in an accident, and there's a pretty high chance statistically that you will, you know, drop off the bike or fall off or whatever, you want to be as safe as possible. So you don't want to go cheap on these things. And obviously you got to keep up to maintenance with your bike if you want to keep riding for a long time, because if not, then what are you going to do? You're just going to have a damaged bike and you're not going to be able to ride. So at the end of the day, it's going to be an extreme, well, not extreme, but it's going to be a pretty huge financial investment. Like, you're not going to get around it. If you're going to do this the right way, you're going to have to invest a lot of money into it. And not only that, but if you want to go ahead and actually up your skill and do this the right way, you're going to want to maybe take some other courses along the way. Maybe like some intermediate classes, some, you know, track days or whatever, if you really want to get really good at this and refine your skill and your high-speed cornering and your low-speed skills under an instructor. You're going to want to do these things, and that's also going to be another financial investment. So, moral of the story, it is really expensive to own a bike. But, I mean, I don't regret it at all. This is a super fun investment. I love every single second that I'm on the bike, and every penny that I've put into the bike has been 100% worth it. So, yeah, that's pretty much all that I wanted to say, guys. Be ready to spend a whole lot of money on this hobby, on the sport, or whatever you want to call it, but it is 100% worth it. So just be ready for it. But yeah, go out there, get you a bike, be safe, and have some fun. Peace.